How many of you have ever made the commitment to try to read through the entire Bible from Genesis through Revelation? Anybody ever try to do that? How many of you honestly were successful in that? You were able to read all the way through from Genesis through Revelation. All right, that's good. How many of you tried, but you got lost somewhere among the laws and the wars and the begats in the Old Testament? Okay, that's not uncommon. And believe it or not, I don't usually encourage new believers to try to read through the whole Bible from Genesis to Revelation, because there are parts of the Old Testament that take some work to understand and appreciate. So we're probably better off reading the Gospels or something else in the New Testament when we're young in our faith. But you know, just about everybody would like to read through the Bible at some point. Some people have it on their bucket list. Before they kick the bucket, they would like to read through the whole Bible. But it's a challenge. You get lost in that who begat who of the Old Testament. Let's be honest, the Bible is a massive compilation. If you have your message notes, I want to give you a few facts and figures to get us off and running to better understand what we're trying to get a handle on. It's not just one book, but it's a collection of 66 books. 66 books written by not a few authors, but 40 different people had a hand in writing our Bibles. It was written in at least 3 different languages in a wide variety of styles, from narrative to poetry to parable to prophecy. It was written in 13 different countries on 3 continents over a 1,500-year period. That's why I'm saying it is massive. It covers the lives, the wars, and the major events of millions of people's lives from at least 19 different nations. And believe it or not, someone has counted and says that there are 3,237 different characters mentioned in the Bible. And that's not even counting groups of people, like a crowd or a mob. But that would be people by name, like Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. That would be people that are not named but referred to, like the man born blind or the paralyzed man let down through the roof. There are over 3,000 different individuals mentioned in the Bible. How could you possibly keep all of that straight? And then the tale itself is epic in scope. It stretches from the very beginning of time, at the beginning of creation, over thousands of years of human history, to the very end of time. It doesn't get any more epic than that. But one of the confusing things about the Bible is that it is only partly chronological. That is, if you try reading Genesis through Revelation, you're not going to be reading steadily forward, but it'll be some forward and forward again and backward again. Let me explain what I mean by that. The books of the Bible were not intended to be arranged solely chronologically. They're only partly chronological. So if you start reading in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, you'll be reading forward steadily chronologically. You get to Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah. Whoop, you're done. You have reached the end of Old Testament history at the end of Nehemiah. But you haven't even got to Esther yet, or Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, or any of the minor prophets that all go back and fill in somewhere. You might be thinking, well, at least by the time I get to the New Testament, it's chronological, but not really. Matthew tells the story of the birth, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Mark does the same thing, except he doesn't cover the birth, but he does go back and tell some of the same stories again of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Then Luke tells the birth, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. John goes back to the beginning, before anything was created. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word... Many of you know that, John 1:1. And he tells the whole story of Jesus, life, death, and resurrection. Well, then we get to the book of Acts. Now we're in a historical book. That's pretty chronological forward. But then as soon as we're done with Acts, we get to all the letters of Paul and Peter and John and the other writers that go back and fit in somewhere during the journeys in the book of Acts or afterwards. So that's why I'm saying we go forward, and then we go backward, then we go forward, then we go backward, because the Bible wasn't intended to be written chronologically. It would be difficult for it to have done so. And there's some duplication between the Gospels and between the history books of the Old Testament. And so the Bible was arranged by style, not by exact historical order. Here's what I mean by style. I've heard different groupings, but there are at least 3 major groupings to the Old Testament and 3 to the New. There's really more, but those are the 3 broad groupings. You have your historical books that are largely the narrative of here's what happened in the beginning. God created the heavens and the earth, and then Moses and the Israelites went on their wanderings through the desert from Egypt. You've got all these historical books, and then you have your books of poetry, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. Then you have all the prophetic books, all the prophecy, major and minor prophets. That's the Old Testament. They're grouped by style. The New Testament is similar. You have the fairly historical order of the Gospels and Acts. They are historically accurate, but they're not totally chronological. Then you've got the letters of the apostles, and then you've got that last book of Revelation that's prophecy, apocalyptic prophecy. So 3 different groupings there. And you take the 3,237 different characters from the 66 books, from the 40 authors in the 3 different languages, and all these groupings. No wonder the Bible is often confusing to people. Many people honestly are confused by it. They want to understand it, but it doesn't make sense to them. They've never been trained or taught how to understand the Bible. So they'll read something, say the Old Testament, and they'll wonder, when did this happen? And why did they do this? And what does that have to do with the bigger picture? And how does it apply to my life? And they may struggle to make all those questions have an answer. And worse than that, because many people don't understand the Bible, they think it's boring. Many people think the Bible is boring. But how can God be boring? The creator of the universe, who is sustaining your heartbeat right now, your automatic breathing right now, the blood flowing through your veins right now. You don't have to do anything. You just sit back and enjoy the ride. Oh, you have to feed the engine and take care of yourself, but God sustains your life, the planet, the solar system, and the universe at all given moments. How can that be boring? And then when God intervenes and invades time and space and crosses path with people, why, that should be the most fascinating set of stories in the world. And it is. That's the story of the Bible. It's only boring because we've made it boring, because we don't understand it. Even things like genealogies come to life when you understand what they're all about. I'll tell you about one in a minute. But before I get there, let me just recognize that the story is God's story. History is His story. And like any story, it's full of drama and intrigue, of love, passion, hatred, deception, murder, betrayal, and redemption. No love story can hold a candle to this one, of a God who loves the people He created so much that He would stop at nothing to rescue them and bring them back to Himself. The greatest love story that's ever been told. In fact, nothing can compare in science fiction to it. How can you compare to flooding the world and preserving a few animals of each kind and Noah and his family? How can you compare to the parting of the Red Sea? What could compare to Jesus walking on water or rising from the dead? Could anything compare to that? And yet that's all part of the story. It's the most amazing book ever written. It's the bestseller of all time. There are an estimated 6 billion copies of the Bible in circulation in the world. But how many people actually read it? A Gallup poll says that there are an average of 4 Bibles in every American home, meaning some have more, some have less, but an average of 4 in every home. But another poll done by the Pew Forum found that only 16% of people who are in the United States read the Bible every day. So our homes are filled with Bibles that we're not reading. So why aren't we reading them? Is it that we've read it and now we think we already know it, so we don't need to read it again? Is it because we've tried to read it, we've had a hard time understanding it and appreciating it? Is it just because, honestly, we're too busy and distracted to sometimes make time for the Word of God in our life? So many people want to, but really don't know the Bible at all.